140 billion euros. That's how much money Russia has here in Belgium, but it's frozen. They can't get access to it. And what's more, Europe wants to give it to Ukraine or loan it to Ukraine or something like that. Anyway, everyone is getting very het up about this story. Why? Why are tempers flaring? Let's have a look. This is Interference. Okay, we're here with Carl, who is our Belgium expert. He's actually Flemish, which makes him half Belgian, I guess. And then we have Alex Phillips joining us from the UK. Hi.
Hello.
Right, we're talking about, but now this is not just a technical issue. I think that's fair, isn't it, Carl? You might think, oh, a load of money, load of Russian money in a bank account, who cares? But no, there are wider implications. Belgium and Mr. De Wever, who is the Belgian Prime Minister, is saying to the rest of Europe, basically, no, you can't have this money. It's in Belgium, and if you do take it, there are wider implications. What are they?
The money is there because Russia, as a foreign power, trusted the Euroclear, that's the institution that had the money, to take care of it, to put money there. So there are other countries that also have money in the Western financial system. And if the West says the rule of law, that doesn't really matter because you have like political powers and we want to use them to punish people we think act badly, there are many countries that can imagine that Europe doesn't agree with them and will take their money away if they want so.
Right, Alex, Carl mentioned the rule of law there. What normally happens during a war is money that other countries have in your country, say, is basically frozen. And then at the end of the war, it's divvied up, normally as part of a peace agreement to fund reconstruction, for example. But Europe is saying, actually, we're going to take this money now and give it to Ukraine, loan it to Ukraine, amounts to the same thing, I think, in this case. Now, this is not normal, is it?
Well, it isn't normal, but it wouldn't be particularly unprecedented. I mean, during a financial crisis, the EU has been known to go in private individuals' bank accounts to take over governments to access money that isn't technically rightfully theirs by saying that actually we need this money to plug a black hole as a result of a financial crisis. So it wouldn't surprise me if there were moves to do this. But I understand the dangerous precedent it might set on an international stage. However, what I would say is this. I imagine how someone like Donald Trump, if he were in the situation of deciding what to do unilaterally, how assertive he would be. And I think that if you look at the rhetoric coming out of the Kremlin at the moment, it knows it's giving Europe the runaround. It is saying, look, Europe is the one standing in the way of there being a peace deal. If Europe wants to fight Russia, come on, we're ready for you. And I get the impression that Putin always thinks Europe won't do it, that Europe is going to back down at the last minute, that it's going to divide Europe and divide the voices of NATO by raising these particular issues. And it's working.
Right, and of course, Carl, Ukraine needs the money, right? I mean, let's face it, Ukraine is fighting a war with the backing of the West, stroke Europe, increasingly now Europe, and needs the money to keep going, right? Without this money, Ukraine goes bust, correct?
But Ukraine needs a lot of things because as it looks like they are losing the war. They don't have enough manpower, they don't have enough guns, they don't have enough drones, they don't have enough rockets, they don't have enough artillery. They don't have enough support from the West because, let's be honest, when the war broke out, the West has been very slow to roll out help. Now there's a big corruption scandal at the heart of the government around Zelensky. So Ukraine is in a very bad situation. So they need all the help they can get. And Europe seems to me unwilling to really help them, as they always have been, has done it with... in a very slow way, protracted way, and now they just see like a quick, easy fix, some money that's laying around, and we'll just throw that at it without thinking of the broader consequences.
So summarise the position of Prime Minister Bart De Wever then, because now we have this growing clash between him and the rest of the EU. Why is he saying no?
Because the implications of that, okay, what's happening is so Ukraine is losing the war, and when the war is over or there's a peace deal, Russia will come, okay, now we want our money back. And if the Belgians say, we gave it away, sorry, then there will be some litigation and prosecution and like internationally, Belgium will be hang out to dry. And no country in Europe or no institution wants to guarantee or back up Belgium. So even they don't believe it. Nobody believes it. It's just some politicians who really want it because it's easy and quick. But if you read the small print and think of the consequences, it's a terrible idea with a lot of negative consequences. So Belgium is saying, no, this is insane, we won't do it. And what they get in reply is like bullying, pressure from European institutions in a very unseating way. And like, oh, you're the new Orban and you're standing alone and this and that. And it's not nice to see.
Right, calling De Wever Orban. Ooh, that must hurt. Alex, I tell you, I had a message from a friend this morning who said, talking about the latest corruption scandal. There seems to be a corruption scandal every week now here in Brussels. And he was saying that Mogherini, I don't know if you followed this, but one of the former bigwigs here in Brussels has just been arrested now on allegations of corruption. And he was saying the Belgians have arrested her in order to show von der Leyen that they won't be a pushover. You see what I mean? He was suggesting that this is some kind of conspiracy, counter-conspiracy. Everyone seems to be getting very het up here in Brussels. What's going on?
Well, tensions really are frayed, aren't they? Because we now have a European Union that is really not a union. It isn't united in diversity. It's pulling in multiple different directions on multiple different fronts. And that's always been the case. But perhaps because we're seeing so much political change across the continent, and even if a legacy party is in power, in most member states, it's trying to ward off the threats from a populist party who normally has a bit of a Eurosceptic bent. And so what we're seeing is essentially the sort of outpouring of democracy across the continent, the people pushing back against the EU, individual member states trying to accommodate those opinions, so trying to look like they're talking tough against Brussels. But it's always been a bit of a broken institution with lots of fights. They've always just been quite good about hiding those things behind closed doors and managing to sort of pay a sop to nations to keep them quiet and keep other ones to heal through various different devices. But I think that, various issues now, you can see the European Union beginning to break apart. I mean, even a big fight over what should happen to the Eurovision Song Contest, whether or not Israel should be allowed to participate, could put the very competition under threat. But this is what happens to any would-be empire that tries to go too far, tries to have too many powers, tries to reach into parts of other nations' sovereignty that it was not designed to do. Eventually, you reach a tipping point.
Well, I think that's fair, isn't it, Carl? I mean, there have been talk about a defeat for Ukraine, if it happens, would actually trigger the end of the European Union because it would just split faced with a existential threat such as Russia. But let's leave that idea to one side at the moment and get back to Euroclear and the frozen funds, because some people say that if this money is taken, confiscated, that foreign investors would no longer trust the euro. So it could be the beginning of the end for the single currency. Is that fair?
Yeah, I totally believe it, because like if you listen to what, for example, Kaja Kallas talks in...
She's the
head of the foreign service in Europe. Yeah. She's basically the top diplomat, but she's not very diplomatic. And they always talk about Trump being an elephant in a porcelain shop, or how do you say, the bull in a china?
That's shop. It, bull in a china shop.
She's much worse. When the war broke out, she said how we should cut up Russia and things like that, like really hardcore bellicose talking points, without anything to back it up. So if that's the diplomacy you're going for, combined with like Europe always having a bent to be extremely ethically motivated in every communication they have. Like if you think on how Europe was talking with Russia in the past, it was about how gay rights and minority rights and like the specific minute agenda, the minute topics that dominate the European agenda, they were like using it as an umbrella for everything else in the world. So, okay, let's talk about gay rights in China, in the Arab world, in South America, in name every country, and they have totally different ethical views. And so those Europeans, those people in power, will have to decide on the loans and the financial transfers of the people they despise like that and don't agree with, and have like no, like, look how they talk with Russia. They don't even understand or try to understand the reasoning in Russia. It's all illegitimate, okay? So everybody who thinks differently is illegitimate, and you don't want to handle their money in according to international law, but according to your own feelings, basically. How will that work out?
And I guess Russia could take revenge. So any assets,
confiscate anything European.
right? Yeah. So how is this going to work out? Is there going to be some kind of compromise, European compromise? I've read that they're talking about some legal nicety to get around this. This is what they normally try and do.
But I think they won't do anything before Trump decides with the peace talks, because in the end, it's international politics, so it's about power, it's about who's strongest, and it's about what's happening in the war. If there's a peace deal, Europe will do nothing because some higher powers will have decided. If there's no peace deal and they take the Russian money, Russia will be less nice in the future. I don't see them doing it. They might do something to save their own faces and we confiscate some Russian stuff and a new package of sanctions, but really strong one this time. But I don't see them taking the money because it's too much, it's too extreme. Even the ECB came out yesterday against it.
Oh, that's right.
It's basically illegal and the consequences are too dire, so we'll never do it. So if the ECB says so, come on, let's be serious.
That's the European Central Bank, which came out and said essentially this would be illegal. They're obviously worried about the future of the euro there, aren't they? Alex, what's your reading of the war?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that it is still a war of attrition, and both sides are running out. But I think Europe has Russia has the ability to regenerate probably a bit quicker. Most European nations who have been backing Ukraine are looking at their own personal finances and going, "This is beginning to hurt. How much further can we go?" And it's quite clear that Putin was responding to this and realizes this is now the Achilles heel, because the messaging coming out of the Kremlin is really pointing the finger at Europe, saying, "I'll fight you if you want to, but we don't want to, but you're getting in the way of this peace deal." Because I think Ukraine knows, without Europe backing it, without the so-called coalition of the willing, saying that the 28 terms written in the potential treaty, which have essentially just been translated from Russian straight from the Kremlin, are not acceptable, Ukraine wouldn't have a leg to stand on. And so Russia knows where the weak point is and is embarking still on a long campaign of grey zone warfare. It's been flying drones into Poland. It's been doing all sorts of things against electricity systems with the acts of sabotage. So it is sort of stirring the pot and making everybody in the EU know, we've got a tentacle into your country. There's something we could probably do that you wouldn't anticipate. And we're going to all the while continually threaten you, be a drain on your resources, and wait to see until you break. I mean, this is one thing about Russia. They can sort of fight long and hard in the cruelest of winters. When it comes to wars of attrition, that is very much the sort of Russian way. And Europe just doesn't seem to have an answer. Putin wants to wrap this up very quickly. If you wanted to draw a conclusion from it, it looks like the odds are stacked more in Moscow's favor than they are in Kiev's.
And I think we can say that the European Union, Europe is once again on the sidelines, right? It doesn't really matter what Europe says. It's up to Trump and Putin. Is that fair?
But that's always the case. It was the same with Israel. It's the same between Trump and Putin. It will be the same when the Americans and China will have a conflict. If something happens in Africa, France is already pushed out. Like, Europe is nothing anymore, internationally speaking.
So what are we going to do? Move out? I mean, Europe's nothing. How low can this go? You've been on holiday in Saudi Arabia recently. Is that where we should all be moving?
Yeah, if you look around, it's booming over there. But seriously, you thought, like, what will happen if Russia wins the war? And we have the Green Deal that we still have to process. We have the car industry going bust. We have our industry going bust in general. We have a demographic decline. We have problems with migration. And we have a political elite fully connected to all those things. So what will happen?
Would you be willing to put on your hard hat and go to the front line, Alex?
Well, not in this particular war, but to defend my own nation, I would be indeed, absolutely, but not for any other country particularly. But I think, it's an important point that European leaders have for a long time kind of thought, we're in charge of a big, wealthy continent. We can pursue all of these luxury ideologies. We can lead from the front, set a moral example. It's that sort of madness of left-wingery where all of a sudden you're spending a load of cash on things that are going to end up ultimately being a drain on resources and are not in the national interest. So whether they're social policies, which I think has really eroded a sense of identity, a sense of common morality, a sense of cohesion, which I actually directly connect to the low birth rates, believe it or not. But also things like the net zero policies, decimating manufacturing, which has left Europe incredibly economically sluggish. When the EU was established, it commanded about at least a quarter of the globe's GDP, and it's now half that in the time that the EU has existed, because it has pursued these sort of left-wing global socialist policies like net zero, like various different types of human rights, the complete failure of open borders, which is tearing up European countries from the inside. It's corroding their spirit, it's corroding their finances, it's disabling them from being able to be assertive and cohesive. And frankly, you have to blame the European leadership for this. The concept that the nation state was somehow redundant is an insult. It's been a failed project. But what's more, we fought 2 world wars to preserve the sovereignty of the nation state. And now we have got this sort of homogenized blob trying to control everything and failing to do so. It's like the collapse of the Roman Empire.
Carl, last question for you. It seems to me as if Europeans, and that includes the good old Brits, will be asked soon whether they are willing to fight and die for Ukraine. I'm wondering if we can compare today's situation to the outbreak of the Second World War, because let's face it, the UK joined the Second World War when Poland was invaded. It was basically saying, Poland is our ally. If you invade Poland, we will go to war. Now, is today's situation in Ukraine analogous, and how will the Europeans respond? Is this a line in the sand? Will European leaders, as you know, French President Macron is talking about conscription. His chief of the army is talking about sacrificing French youngsters in the name of Ukraine. Is Europe going to be willing to? Are Europeans going to be willing to die for Ukraine?
But Europeans haven't been willing to really help Ukraine at too much of a cost. So I don't think they will do more now. And I wouldn't also go to World War II. We do it too much, and I don't see the resemblance at all. I think the existential threat of the totalitarian ideologies is not present right now. Even China, which is communist, isn't really communist all that much, or it's not their main animus of their international and national behavior. Russia is not driven by ideology. I would also connect it to, like Alex did, with the fall of the Roman Empire. And like at the end of the Roman Empire, you had like pieces of land breaking away and a lack of central authority. And the Roman Empire always was about central authority. And it led to the Middle Ages, which, by the way, were underappreciated, I might say, I think. But that will happen now as well, I think. So we just have like the central leadership will become weaker and weaker because people will question it more, will ask, who are you to say that? Like, you're not even elected. Why should we listen to you? It doesn't even work what you're prescribing. So I just see Ukraine will be a messy solution that nobody will happy with. But in a broader sense, rather than World War II, I see a sort of disintegration of the European Union as it is and different forms of cooperation. We've already seen it at Belgium, for example, pleading for intenser cooperation with Luxembourg and the Netherlands. We'll see like the Scandinavians working together. We have Visegrad already, like some Eastern European countries working together. Mediterranean countries will work more intensely together because they have more shared reality and shared interests. And the European common interest, as was the case under the protection of the USA, with a stable international globalizing world, that's just disappearing, and Europe will have to adapt to it. And the European Union, as it is today, is not up for the task.
Well, there you go. We started out with an obscure bank account in Euroclear here in Belgium. We ended up with a collapse of the European Union. I guess that's the way it goes, huh? One butterfly flaps its little wings in Brussels and the whole thing collapses. Thanks a lot, Carl. Thanks as always, Alex. See you next time.